I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, Velocities in Music. We do music reviews. Tom and I have taken a break this week to go back and review some throwback records from the past several decades that we want to review because we never get the chance, if we're constantly reviewing new records, how do we ever get to the old stuff?
Yeah.
You guys request a lot of old stuff, and every once in a while an album comes along there. Tom and I go, I think we really just want to review this. One of those records Tom got super into, and when we were going up to see Elbow in Minneapolis, he played for me, and then I listened to it a few times, and that is Sunny Day Real Estate's fourth and final record, The Rising Tide. Now, Tom, we don't like Sunny Day Real Estate at all, do we?
That's right, yeah. Well, it's kind of our inside joke that every band sounds like Sunny Day Real Estate.
Every single band actually does sound like Sunny Day Real Estate. But Dashboard Confessionals, they sound like Sunny Day Real Estate.
If you're playing a guitar and you're dude singing, you sound like Sunny Day Real Estate.
Obviously, that's a fact. Anyways, Tom, who are Sunny Day Real Estate? Where do they come from? What do they do? Why are they here anymore?
So, Sunny Day Real Estate is a band. Their first album came out in 1994, Diary, and it was kind of an integral part of the emo movement, really.
It totally was.
And even post-hardcore, just a great, just heartfelt, hard-hitting rock album. From there, we did end up reviewing their third album, actually, How It Feels to Be Something On. Before that came LP2, or Pink Album, and then the fourth album, Rising Tide. Now, being that this is their fourth album, this, as similar to some other throwbacks that we've done, marks a big change in sound for them. I kind of think of Sunny Day Real Estate's career being in kind of two phases, whereas their first two albums encapsulate kind of the more raw emo feel. How It Feels to Be Something On and The Rising Tide have a much more polished and progressive rock sound.
And I think that was definitely affected by the band's history, because from what I've read, LP2 doesn't have an album title because the record company, the band had effectively broken up.
Yeah.
After at that point, and so the record company released the album just without a title, as the lead singer and main songwriter Jeremy Enigk, is that how you say it? From Iowa.
Yep.
Can't pronounce anything if you're from Iowa. That's just a fact. As he found Jesus and became a born again Christian, I think that affected a lot of the rest of the band, or so the story goes, and then the band kind of fizzled out.
Yeah.
They then a few years later reformed, made the brilliant How It Feels to Be Something On, and then a few years later made this, and then after this record, apparently they had all sorts of problems with their new record label and things like that.
That's
and
right.
the band just fizzled out and really haven't been seen since.
Yep. So by the time that How It Feels to Be Something On came out, they had already lost Nate Mandel, their original bass player. He went and joined the Foo Fighters. Their drummer, William Goldsmith, actually did for a short time in there as well. So they got a different bass player on here, but also another thing is they lost one of their guitarists and founding members, Dan Horner. So he also did backup vocals. So all of a sudden you've got this completely not only different lineup, besides Jeremy kind of being at the forefront of it and the drummer coming back, but you're down to a 3-piece from a 4-piece, and that's a big change.
It automatically makes your sound more thinner.
Absolutely, but the way that they compensated for that, I think really helps. I think they made up for a lot of that. But this is one of those transitional albums, even though unfortunately and very sadly they didn't transition into anything else because this was their last one. It's one of those albums, I think to a lot of classic albums where bands lost members or had an intense lineup change, and it's always a mixed bag. Sometimes it can really succeed, like personally I think it did for Blur with Think Tank. Graham Coxon was a genius, but without him they still pulled something good off. And I think that's what Sunny Day Real Estate did on this album. Obviously Jeremy's doing a lot more of the work, but he was always kind of the lead songwriter behind everything also. Now, one thing that will piss off some fans who are like, oh, Diary all the way, is that this is a much more polished and probably radio-friendly rock sound.
You could definitely make the argument that it's more radio-friendly. The band was certainly going for an aspect that they really hadn't gone for in any of their 3 previous records, which is that a lot of these songs are geared towards establishing a mood on every single track. The song that particularly comes to mind off the top of my head, which is one of my track picks, is track 3, Rain Song.
I love that song.
Of course, there's no Led Zeppelin references here. Rain Song and The Ocean both being on the same album. That's never happened before. Anyways, but this band obviously is exploring new territory and trying to do these more moody and slightly atmospheric parts. They're definitely focusing on creating an environment with sound. Whereas before, especially in their pinnacle, and my favorite record by this band is How It How It Feels to Be Something On, they were all about rock songwriting. It was all about creating these, these build-ups and structures and climaxes and outros, and it was all about just the impact of the songwriting and how it played on the listen. Where this is about establishing the mood and taking those principles that they establish in How It Feels to Be Something On and adding this mood and atmosphere element to it.
Yeah.
It totally fits in with what you were saying. This is transitional. It's just too bad they didn't transition to anything else.
It's true.
Because you hear a lot of those remnants of these, like the things that they were doing from a song structure perspective, and then you see the band trying to experiment with these like extended mood plays, and it comes off, and I think it could rub people differently depending on like what your favorite is. I definitely prefer How It Feels to Be Something On.
But I think that's just a testament to how good this band is. They only put out 4 records, but I can distinctly think of various people I've talked to, and even review websites I've gone to that disagree about which is the best Sunny Day Real Estate album.
Because they're all good.
Exactly. I know my brother, this one's his favorite one. This is the one that AllMusic picks as their best album. I know a lot of people who like Diary the best. I know you and I both like How It Feels to Be Something On the best.
You give it a 100.
Absolutely. It's an incredible album. And that just goes to show, now when you have a band with such a limited discography, only 4 albums, but still no one can agree on what their masterpiece is, it just shows that they didn't do any wrong. They absolutely did not. And so regardless of what you think about what's your favorite, what's your least favorite, this is just a band that it is worth exploring their entire discography. And where Rising Tide falls into that for you will really depend on what you prefer. Some people like the raw emotion of their early work. This album falls much more in line with bands like Yes and Rush. You hear a clear prog rock influence, even if it's formatted in more of a single-worthy approach. I mean, God, you listen to the vocals on tracks like Rain Song and The Ocean. It just sounds like Yes. It's just screams Yes.
I gotta say, track 2-1. Funny. I just realized what they did there. on the track 1, it just that chorus is just infectious. The way it gets stuck in your head. These guys know how to write really catchy melodies and really good instrumentation parts that just get stuck in your head, and you just can't get the melody out of your head. And what I will say about this album is, as I continued to listen to this, more tracks grew on me. But from the get-go, the first 3 tracks really stole the show for me. And then I later grew to like tracks 4 through 8. The last 3 tracks on this record I still like, but just not on the same level. So I would say that I would call this album front heavy.
I totally agree. For me, the first 6 tracks are damn near perfection.
Snipe is great. Even though neither of us picked it.
It's maybe the weaker of the front half, but it's still a great song. For me, the weaker spots on this album were track 7, Fool in the Photograph, and then tracks 9, 10, and 11, Television, Faces in Disguise, and The Rising Tide, the title track. And it's not even that any of those songs
are
are
just
bad.
more experimental. They're trying new things here, and it just didn't necessarily have the masterful sound that the first tracks did.
And a big part of it, too, is that the last 2 tracks in particular, Faces in Disguise and The Rising Tide, they're the longest 2 tracks on the album. And this is an album that averages at 4 to 5 minutes a track,
it's like
as it is.
52 minutes long.
Exactly. And those tracks offer some great dynamics and some big sprawls, but by that point, I'm more in tune with some of the melodies and some of the structures that they've implemented on the first 5 or 6 tracks. And so by that point, I'm a little over it. The album's at like 50 minutes, but it's still
I definitely don't think that this is a masterpiece of a record, nor will it ever go down in history as like one of the best albums of all time. But it's, as Tom said earlier, this is just a band that can really do no wrong. This album, The Rising Tide, is worth listening to. And for that, I think it's just really well written. Just a totally great album, and I love listening to it. I'm going to give this an 86.
I'm going to give it a 93.
Okay, so we definitely really, really like this record. If you guys would, please go out and listen to The Rising Tide if you haven't already, and let us know what your favorite Sunny Day Real Estate album is. And leave us a comment discussing those things at www.velocitiesofmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesofmusic. Now, as always, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and let Tom and I know which albums you'd like to see us review on this channel, new or old. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, Moving Music Critique Forward.